Okay, everybody, here we go. Here is the screencast I'm making you for the uh, the lesson that we place Friday. Well, I'm here at Elon. Okay, so this won't take long. Just to, we'll see how long it takes. I'll tell you at the end how long it is, but we'll see. Okay, so there were some questions that came up at before we went out on the field lab about what body parts you needed to remember. And I just wanted to pull this slide back up because I think that went kind of quickly. And actually, if you need to pause this, just hit your space bar and pause it. You won't have to back up. I think you've probably used these before. But anyway, I had this up before, and this is very familiar to you, and it may have been a bit odd when I first introduced this. But these are the three body parts that are anatomical features that I think is important for you to know. The carapace, which is obviously the shell that we measured over and over. And I think Chris was pointing out that it was kind of unique to see that, okay, so that a lot of you didn't realize that they back into the sand, but now you can see that with the eye buds here. But this is the full length of the carapace that you measured. I'm hoping you can see my cursor pretty well. And then the net-like structure here that you look at, that's the net that the animal has to be able to hold eggs, is only found on the female. So that's a good thing that you can tell a female so quickly, and you guys are getting really good at that. And then the telson, or the tail-like structure that you pull back to be able to see the pleopods. So the pleopods are the net-like structure. So if you see the pleopod, you see a female. And again, as we talked about, if you see the eggs, you would never pull back the telson because you know it's a female. That's the only reason for doing the gender. So those are the three things that you need to remember, because that was part of our protocol for figuring out what they were and what kind of data we collected. So I just want to show this again on this feature here, this diagram of the crab carapace moving, from here to here, which you've all measured, so it makes a lot more sense now. Here's the telson hanging down, and then beneath that you can see the pleopods. And here's your scientific name reminder, okay? Now, we kind of flew through this, so I just wanted to make sure as you look back at your notes that you've got a solid idea of what is recovery and how is it measured. We really don't know fully how to measure it, but I think it's a good idea to just take a second and review in your mind what we talked about with respect to recovery. Something happens, something big happens that's difficult for the biological community in that area, and when we go in to document what has returned or what has been restored, that is a measure of recovery, okay? So this question we still don't really know the answer to, but we can look at some of the data on how that we've collected over the years on the sand crabs as an indicator species to see if it's recovered from that massive spill and all the details with it. So the data comes from the Limpets website that we're going to take a quick look at on Tuesday for some data entry. This is the kind of data that we looked at quickly in class. I just want to review this with you so you kind of have it in your heads, because I think we really did fly through this. Remember, this is Rat Beach, which was the reference site. And this was the pre-event reference sites. You can see that this is measured by average number of crabs per core. So each handful, how many did you find per core? Recruits, males, females with eggs, if you see that. And so that's the reference site. So this is the site, the pre-event site. So you have a lot of everything except females with eggs. And again, that was March. So then after the event, we went back a year. This previous data that I just showed you was the immediate post-event data. After the 6 weeks of closing, we went in and monitored again. So it looked pretty good. And then Manhattan Beach in 2006, which was a year later, again, looked pretty good, looked solid in terms of that number per core. And if you look at this scale here, this does change, which is a little bit deceiving as you go chart to chart. It's not the same scale. It's the average per core, but they set up the scale based on how many you find. This is rat a year later, so doing, again, very similar. So in terms of gauging recovery from these initial surveys that we did, we were expecting to find nothing and things slowly return like we talked about. But we started to see, like I mentioned in class, in case this went too quickly, that we're starting to see fewer and fewer females with eggs. Here's 2007, no females with eggs. Here's 2008, 2009, no females with eggs. 2010, we saw some females with eggs. But remember, that was the year that we had the cold. It never got warm in the summer, so everything stayed cold, so plankton stayed high, so everything was really, really, really healthy. 2014, we've moved ahead a couple of years. We found a lot of recruits, but fewer of the adults, and still no females with eggs. And again, that was true I just to double check, another beach, Carmel, which is in Northern California, found the same kind of thing. Very similar findings. Lots of recruits, although in Carmel they did have a few females with eggs. So and Half Moon Bay, so other parts of California did seem to have a little bit better result. So I thought it would be important at this point, well, if we're asking about recovery of this site, we really need to have some time to talk about fecundity, which is maybe a new idea for you, which is the measure of the reproductive rate of an organism or a population, as you see here. So how fertile is this population? How many offspring do they produce? That's fecundity, and that's probably a new word to you. And just so you know, it is related to fertility, which is an individual organism's ability to produce offspring. And that usually is a thing that happens with maturity, or and then later on, as animals get much older, they produce more offspring, so the fertility increases. But fecundity is about the population. So really, we're looking at recovery based upon the fecundity of the sand crab, and we really can't answer whether or not that's happened. So hold on, I'm going to get back to grunion. I just wanted you to take a peek at this, at what the data looks like that we record at the Olympics website. See if you can get a look at that website. But anyway, we put in our data, and if you look through the years, I've just pulled up a few of them, but if you look over the years, once you put in your average number of crabs per core, or once you put in your animals per core, then the website calculates the average per core and then the abundance per square meter. So you can see over the years, we've had some big jumps, and then we had a huge dip in 2014, and then which was right around the where we were thinking Fukushima was having an impact on our shores, and then it's 2014-15. Later on in the year seemed a bit better, and then in 2015, things looked quite a bit better. But that's the kind of chart that you can generate at that Olympus website, and I'll show you a little bit more about this. So basically, we've got the basic answer to do we have recovery at 21st Street is based upon the fecundity of that sand crab population. Are we seeing it recover to pre-event numbers? I think we can say tentatively yes, although things are happening with the females with eggs that make us worry a little bit about the overall ability of that population to reproduce. So even though we've got the number of crabs has recovered, the fecundity may very well be something that we have to take a look at later. So I know that's kind of a lame answer. Is it recovered? We thought, like I said in class, you think an event happens, the population drops, the event is over, the population recovers, but it's not always that simple. So we're tentatively optimistic that has happened. Let me show you also that you can come up with some of these studies about, like this is from this Journal of Experimental Marine Biology and Ecology, and here's if you just quickly scan this, take a second and scan this abstract, you can kind of look at it as I'm talking. They took several populations in California of the Emerita analonga, just like we've been working on, and they found that they couldn't find any kind of pattern between north and south in terms of egg size, or whether or not there was fecundity in size of crabs in a certain area. But they definitely saw that if you look here, fecundity was significantly correlated with crab carapace length in all populations. So the bigger the animal, the more offspring they're going to produce. And actually that's a principle in the MPAs as well. So if you're looking at this, and that's again, this is the exact kind of study that our data could produce, is like when you go from two different sites or two different areas, you measure their carapace length, you look at whether or not they're reproductively active, you check gender like we did, and then you get a nice set of data for what's going on in those two areas. But I just wanted to inspire you that the data that you collected can actually be used for studies like this, and that these fecundity studies really help us understand how healthy the biological community of the beach actually is. Okay, so I thought you'd be interested in seeing what kind of data you produce, what people can do with it, researchers can do with it, what you could do with your group research or your individual research, and then what what it means for recovery in that area. Okay. So that's the last thing that we're going to talk about with sand crabs. So come up with your list of questions for Tuesday. But let's talk a little bit about, now we're moving on to vertebrate animals. This is the grunion. Look at the beautiful colors on their bodies. This is the fish that's a beach spawner. They don't spend any time on the beach. Obviously, fish don't, but except to come out to spawn. And actually, we don't find them in the water in other capacities. We don't see them. We don't catch them in nets. We don't see them in the stomachs of other fish. So their life history is not well known at all. It's just that they come ashore to mate at the very highest tide of the highest wave of the highest tide of the year, which is the spring tide. The female does a quick nest by wiggling her body down into the sand. The males encircle her and fertilize the eggs as she releases them. So they externally fertilize, and then she quickly gets out of the sand, wiggles up out of the sand, and then 10 days later when the next tide comes up, the eggs hatch. And this is actually one of the craziest sights to see. I mean, we're so lucky in California we get to see this. This is exactly what it looks like, although the runs have been a little bit smaller lately, kind of like everything. We seem to be having like lower populations along the coast over the last few years. But think of this. I mean, think of this. A fish that that has gills, hurls itself out of the water onto the beach to leave its eggs above the highest tide, so the eggs won't be washed away by the waves until 10 days later when the little eggs are ready to hatch into small fry or young hatchlings. And you got to be asking yourself, why would they do that? And again, if we were in class together, we'd get everybody's ideas, and I'm sure you'd have all sorts of good ideas. But we're looking at a species that has found that if they can get their eggs away from marine predators, that they have had some sort of evolutionary success with that. Obviously, the more that we use beaches, the more that becomes a little bit of a problem. But for a long time, it's served the grunion well. So, pardon me, as we tend to use the beach more, and then as predators become dialed into the fact that they have this timing of their spawning on the highest tide, you sometimes see animals like this great blue heron that will show up at the highest tide of the day, and that they will then also feed on the adults, which is really sad because they're taking both the female and her eggs, which is really cheesy. And then humans will not only take the grunion when they come up to spawn, but they'll also can damage the eggs, and we'll talk a little bit about how human behavior does that. So here's an important question that I'd like you to address, and actually this actually does have just so you know, this is not just another example of humans doing something awful. This story has a happy ending. Okay, so if you look at this picture, we all see this, and we've talked about this, that kelp is not a bad thing, but some people don't like it because they feel like it litters the beach. Well, so now people groom the beaches, they scrape up all the kelp, and what they found is, I can answer this is a yes or no question. It does harm grunion eggs. What happens is that not only is the nest disturbed, but individual eggs are disturbed. I mean, look at them; they're so cute with their little eyes. So what can we do? This is a really, really wonderful example of humans doing some small thing that helps an animal. So what we do is, if you can actually point the groomer above the high tide line, and not groom anything below high tide during grunion season, there is a dramatic, significant, incredibly exciting lack of damage to the nest. So the nest success just skyrockets if we don't groom below high tide, and it's such a simple, easy thing to do. And like I'm showing you here, this is an example of moral extensionism. We've decided, okay, we care about the grunion. The grunion deserves to live. We're going to extend ourselves morally and make this decision. We're not going to groom below high tide, and basically we rescue a species. So I just love that example of how we can help ourselves. how we can help those around us by slightly altering our behavior. Okay, so and again, that's taking responsibility for our species, which we love in our studies of stewardship. This is this great woman from Pepperdine, Karen Martin, who started a project called the Beach Greeters, like the grunion greeters, and she teaches them how to estimate grunion run sizes, and then she has them patrol the beach to protect grunion from poachers. We should really get involved in this if you want to. And she's really kind of an amazing person in that she's come up with this idea of not grooming above high tide or below high tide during grunion season, which is in the spring and early summer. But she also has the ability to talk to to people, beach groomer, people who run the groomers, and so she's got this amazing set of skills. We had her speak once, and she was a little odd. I'm not gonna lie, but I think cutting her some slack. I think it's because she's really is one of those people that can communicate very very well with these guys who go out and run the groomers, and she has to be able to communicate to them, the significance of this without of where to point the groomers, and that an entire species can be rescued as a result. So she's been an inspiration to a lot of people because of her combination of talents. Oh wait, here. So let me show you this quick video. You're gonna love this of a southern species that actually does their spawn at night, or I'm sorry, during the day, whereas ours is at night. But check out this capelin. This is our buddy David again. Look at this.
Leaving the sea and emerging onto land is hard enough for turtles. It's even harder for fish. Each year, for hundreds of miles along the Newfoundland coast, capelin throw themselves onto the beaches. At least 1 million tons of fish floundering out of the water, a real gift for scavenging eagles and gulls. Odd though it may seem for a fish, these capelin, like the turtles, have also come out of the sea to breed. The males are trying to fertilize the eggs that the females are depositing in the sand. Like the Ridley's turtles, they have synchronized their mass laying with the tide. In a few days, it will be over. Most of the capelin done, but only after they've left their eggs in the sand. Other capelin populations lay their eggs in the ocean. So why do the Newfoundland fish spawn on land? It seems that eggs deposited in the beach may be safer from predators and develop faster than in colder waters out to sea.
Yeah, there's a good example of a very similar species that has the ability to do this beach spawn that helps them. Oops, sorry, something funky with the sound. So I thought you'd enjoy seeing that. Our grunion, we go back to this picture, our grunion do not die after spawning like the capelin. They actually are alive and well and will spawn again. So that's why it's important that we protect them. Like the capelin, they're coming in to spawn just before dying like the salmon do. But our grunion are do not die. It's not a last spawn. They'll come again and again. So that's kind of a cool beach spawner. And I'm just gonna do a little bit on sea turtles in this screencast like I would have done in class on Friday, because we won't have time to get to all this cool turtle stuff in one day. But I'll save all the absolute best turtle stuff for class on Monday. But I just wanted to get started on it a little bit. So you can have a little bit of background. Hopefully you've done the reading on it as well, because I know for a lot of you it's your favorite animal. So there are the 7 species you can see here, and you can jot those down as I'm talking about them, but I also have a slide on the next page that shows them all. So I think it's great if you have the opportunity to ID them on site, and I'm not going to ask you to do that for the test, the Sandy Beaches test, but I'm just saying, you're out in the water, a turtle comes up, I think it'd be great for you to know which is which. But they they obviously range from those that are the largest, like the leatherback, the small scamps. Really, we'll go through that here in a second. But they have different environments. Let's take a quick look, and you'll see those names again. And if you want to, you can stop that slide and go through and write those down. But this just kind of gives you a quick graphic that shows you the different species. Some of them are beach spawners. Some of them are cold water, some of them are warm water, but we're going to go through each of those in class on Monday. And I have this little thing where you can look at the turtle and guess the name without seeing the name, and then I'll tell you what the name is of each of them. Okay, amazing, beautiful reptiles. The sea's only reptile. Okay, so morphology is the study of structure, right? And sea turtles actually have bodies that have been in the fossil record for 65 million years, so that obviously has worked for them. It's kind of interesting that reptiles are ideally suited for life on the land because they have the watertight skin and a shelled egg, but they went back into the water, which is interesting. So they have very streamlined bodies. They can move through the water very efficiently. The carapace is just like on our sand crabs, is the shell on top. Plastron is the shell, a name we give to the shell on the bottom. They appear to have some fatty deposits beneath the skin and the bone and the shell. And remember when we talked about blubber, when we talked about sea otters, that's lighter, and that makes them more buoyant. They also have very light, spongy bones. And of course, they have this typical modified flippers, or forelimbs that really over evolutionary time have become flippers for propulsion and steering. So those reptiles that left the land and initially went into the water hundreds of millions of years ago there was a very large species. I'm not going to ask you to remember these names. I'm just showing you this so you wrap your head around the fact that they haven't always looked that way, and that actually it's a little bit strange to have a reptile leave the land, be ideally suited for land existence, terrestrial existence, and then go back into the water like the sea turtle has done. Yeah, as you probably have taken note, we don't have very many reptiles in the ocean. Okay, there's only a handful that we'll talk about. So we always run into this. We ran into this with the sea otter. We're going to run into this with other animals. When you look at what an animal eats, it can be a little bit daunting when you see this list. So take a look at this list, and if we were in class together, I would be asking you to take a look at this and see some of these animals: crabs, shrimp, fish, snails, especially the shrimp, conch. I'm listing off animals that yes, you're right, one of you would get it. One of you would get this. We eat them too. So these are animals, just like with the sea otter, that place the sea turtle in competition with humans because they eat the sea turtle. They eat the same foods. Shrimp in particular is a problem for sea turtles, and we'll talk about on Monday some of the things that sea turtles use to something humans can use. Another wonderful example of a way that humans can help sea turtles when they run into them in their feeding grounds when they're gathering fish for humans. But this is kind of an important one. The green sea turtle is actually the only vegetarian, the only herbivorous sea turtle, so that they feed only on the grasses. And again, the jellies, this is something that you might have thought of when I asked you to take a look at the list and see what you thought about it. Jellies look like plastic bags look like jellies, so some of the species that eat the jellies are in trouble because they have eaten marine debris, and that can cause their stomachs to fill with debris, like we talked about. And they either don't eat because they feel so full that they're not hungry, or else they're choked by the debris. So that's not good. They actually have an amazing way of navigating. Sea turtles will return to their nesting beaches. Some of them return to the actual nest where they were hatched, and so that's incredible. And they do this by using a combination of these things you see on this slide. They both use cues that they see visually, so they are concerned with what they see. They also are mindful of wave direction, so in what direction are the waves breaking, and so they follow that. And they probably use magnetic fields to get close. Many sea turtles range the entire ocean, but then make it back to the beach where they hatch. We believe they smell the beach when they walk down it as hatchlings and return. So those are some of the those are some of the things that are imprinting. They're imprinting on the beach as they go. But it's amazing that they can get back to some of these beaches. So in order to understand their migration and their habitat so we can protect them, we sometimes put radio tracking devices on them that don't seem to impede them in any way, so don't worry about that. This particular sea turtle is named Isabel, and so we can actually get a satellite map of where they go. And so if you look at the dates, you can sort of see where the animal went from release to the last time that they were recorded. And so this animal is spending some time along the shore, was released in one location, and then wound up being in another location several months later. So they don't actually have a big range, but I mean, we're released in North Carolina, and then they're finding them in Rhode Island. I mean, that's a long way. But I mean, it doesn't range the world ocean like some of them, but this is the kind of data that can be generated from these radar satellite tracking devices. Here's a different way to look at the data. These colors are days at large, so you can see the release date. And this animal moved farther offshore. Here we are. This is off Portugal and Morocco. So this is obviously Eastern Atlantic. So you've got a lot of activity here, moving out to shore, moving back in. Maybe these were nesting attempts. We don't know. But this is the kind of data we can generate. I have had students use data like this for their individual research. It's really exciting data for these for this satellite tracking. I think that might be my last one. But I just wanted to show you a beautiful picture of one of the hawk's bills, and let me just show you something that I hope one day all of you get to see. This is just an absolutely glorious hawk's bill that's just out in the ocean. Let's just take a second and look at this. So absolutely beautiful. I can actually send you a link to this video that you can watch. It has no narration. It's just these beautiful animals. And there is just something truly soulful about being underwater with these guys that you can hear about from the Galapagos crew in class on Monday. So I know I kind of flew through that, and I know that was a little bit disjointed about the individual species, the 7 species. What I'm going to do, let me just give you an example of the first one. So what I'm going to do on Monday, just for fun to start class, is I'm going to show you a picture like this, and then you can guess which one it is, and then I'm going to tell you the name. So there's the first one. So don't worry about that. We're just going to turn that into a fun quiz, and that's not anything in particular that you're going to need to know. You just need to know there are 7 species, and then we'll talk a little bit about the larger ones and the smaller ones. And I think that's it for today. This is looks like a 29, almost a 30-minute screencast. So we will have some fun on Monday with more sea turtles. Okay? Thanks, guys. See you then.